to our AI Unplugged Without Borders video podcast series, part of our Transatlantic AI Exchange. Get ready for a lineup of fascinating talks on deep tech and artificial intelligence seen through the lens of top minds across the ecosystem. Today, I'm pleased to talk to Daniel Rowland about AI and the music industry, evolution, impact, and the future predictions. Daniel is a unique combination of a music producer, audio engineer, tech executive, and educator. In addition to the roughly 5+ billion streams of the music he has helped create, Daniel is the head of strategy and partnerships at LANDR, based in Canada, a co-founder of online DAW audio tool, a longtime instructor at MTSU. For nearly a decade, his primary focus has been on the empowerment of music creators via ethical AI-driven tools and accessible designs, sharing that message on dozens of panels and podcasts. I'm your host, Thomas Neubert, born and raised in Germany, a longtime entrepreneur, living here in beautiful Silicon Valley for over 33 years, and the founder of the Transatlantic AI Exchange. Join me and enjoy the session with the music use case that I'm very much looking forward to share with you all. Thank you. Daniel, welcome to our session here, our podcast session from the Transatlantic AI Exchange. I'm very, very pleased to welcome you in the series of the AI Unplugged Without Borders. Today's topic, as I mentioned before, it's AI and the music industry, the evolution, the impact, and the future prediction. Personally, I am really intrigued to have more industry use cases to be discussed and explored on our podcast series, not just generative AI here and applied AI. I love use cases, and I think the audience like that as well. So I just introduced you on a very high level, but maybe in your own words, if you can explain a little bit who you are, what you do, sure. Who LANDR is. I got engaged, full disclosure, I got engaged with LANDR very early on, around 9 years ago. And I actually ended up liking the vision, and I liked the team, and I invested a little bit of money in your company. But things have changed a lot since then. Yeah. So the floor is yours. Go ahead.
Nice. I think you've been involved in LANDR even a little bit longer than me, which is great. Yeah. So quickly, I come from the creative side of the music industry. I've been a gigging musician since I was 14, basically. So I've been making money playing music since then, and then grew into the more professional side of the industry, producing albums, mixing, mastering albums. I've done quite a bit of that in my career and still do at a pretty high level. So I approach everything I do from that perspective. The other thing that I do, I kind of have 3 pillars of what my career is based on. It's the creative side, it's education. I'm probably the most passionate about education. I've been a college professor for about 15 years, full time. And teaching music production, teaching MIDI synthesis, helping people get from, wanting to learn how to make music to actually, doing it hopefully at a professional level. So I love that. And then the last thing is in the tech side, when I got, I started developing some mobile applications with friends of mine at a company we founded in Amsterdam over 10 years ago. And that led me eventually to working with LANDR, which I've been there for now about 9 years, or a little after the time that I think you started talking with LANDR. And I came on as their senior audio engineer. So as somebody who had like the ears, and LANDR, if you don't know, by the way, for everybody watching and listening, is an AI mastering platform, right? So it was really the first company to productize at any scale machine learning or AI in relation to music production tools. So I came on as somebody who was not turned off by the idea, where a lot of engineers were. They were threatened by it. It was going to end the industry. All this stuff we are still hearing about when you talk about AI, it hasn't really changed. But I just thought maybe it could sound better, and I wanted to lend my ears to that. And we eventually hired people even more talented than myself, certainly, to aid with that, and grew it over the years. So that's where I started. I'm now head of strategy and partnerships with that company. And I just am passionate about music technology and AI's role in it. And it's something that I spend a lot of time talking about, meeting with companies about, and speculating on where the industry is heading. So that's me.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Very interesting background. And I like the fact that you are passionate about the educational side of it. At the same time, you seem to be very very hands-on when it comes to using the tools, not just lecturing it. You just literally live and breathe the whole thing. So a week ago or so when we chatted, you had a comment to me and you said, I'm looking forward to have a bunch of meetings with interesting companies over the last few days. We haven't talked since, but you said you met with companies and they are kind of in the center of this AI firestorm. You mentioned, the major label companies. You mentioned, microphone manufacturers and independent creators. And particularly around the topic with generative music and training and copyright data.
Yep.
Tell us a little bit more. How were these meetings? What did you learn? What are the takeaways? And most importantly, because of our audience, we want to educate them. We want to inspire them. We want to, and we want to connect VCs and customers, whatever, but we also want to educate people on what's possible with AI to trigger thought processes. And I like to use individual use cases as such, because then other people, even with other industry, can maybe think about this different and get some interesting ideas. So what were the learnings from these interesting?
Lots to discuss. So, so first, it's just been fascinating. Like I said, I'm kind of heavily involved in this space since people know it. So a lot of companies, I approach a lot of companies because I want to talk to them about what they're doing and what they're thinking, what their strategies are. And then a lot of people approach me, which is why I kind of, this past week has been just a tremendous amount of that because, things are changing so quickly. Like by the time people listen and watch this, I can't even imagine what will have happened, even if it's a week from now, right?
Yeah.
So the big thing, of course, I think most people are aware of that's freaking everyone out. And this is not just in music, right? This is in video, this is in media, it's in gaming, is the generative AI side of things, right? And specifically data sets around how some of this absolutely amazing generative AI technology is trained, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in particular, there's a few companies recently on the AI side of things, in the music side of things, Suno and Udio, that have come out and just changed everything. I mean, it's like we warped ahead 10 years or 5 years or whatever from what people thought, myself included. And I thought I knew what the state of the art was possible. Like it's just been shocking. And then to see how people are using these platforms is not just shocking for me, it's shocking for the people who built them. So it's a fascinating time. Record labels are very concerned about this. We're seeing labels, unlike in the days of streaming, right? Pirated streaming, the move to streaming. Labels were a little obstinate to that, right? And they got burned and it kind of hurt the industry for a long time. They have not been that way towards AI to a large degree. They're investing in a lot of these AI companies, right? They're trying to have equity stakes so they at least are following what's going on if the industry shifts. At the same time, they're freaked out by the technology, right? Specifically, the technology that is not assistive so much, but is just like the prompt and you get a completely produced song that sounds like Taylor Swift did it. That is concerning for them because that is potentially very disruptive to their business model, to problematic for publishers, all sorts of things, irrespective of what it was trained on, right? Just the fact that it exists and people can make music at that level of quality is problematic. And we'll probably talk about that here in a minute, where it is going to lead to a change in the way that people consume music.
Yeah, exactly. So you mentioned just a few names that I've honestly never heard of, these companies.
Okay.
But can you give us some tangible ideas of what exactly they are doing that is different than in the past because of AI?
Absolutely. So the two companies I just mentioned are important for everyone, even if you're not a music maker, where you will be once you go look these companies up, because it really opens the funnel for everyone, as long as you have some degree of taste and can enunciate an idea, or you could have it randomize something for you. They're prompt-based music generation companies, right? So they work very similarly. You go to their website and it'll suggest, maybe it'll give you a prompt that says, I would like a hip hop track that also mixes country and anything else, right? And you could say with or without drums. You can get very specific. You can choose genres. You can type in whatever you want. Long story short, including adding your own lyrics. So if you want to, if you're not musical but you can write a poem, right? Or you want to use ChatGPT to help you write something, you can paste that in, and it will present you a fully composed piece of music with sung vocals in any genre you can literally imagine, and ones you've never even heard of that have never even existed before, because it's able to combine everything that it's been trained on. And these things have been trained on everything, like it's fascinating and to see what people are using this for, because it's not, they're using it to, again, compose their own pieces of music, right? Use their own lyrics to make things come to fruition. They're just having it, they're just curating, having it generate multiple things until they come to something they like. On some of these platforms, Udio is an example, it gives you a 30-second nugget of an idea that you can then extend and edit and change. So you're able to kind of interact with the AI and have some degree of agency over what's going on. And that will only increase. This Udio, as an example, has been around for 2 weeks, right? It was released 2 weeks ago. This is how new we are. So it's important that everyone, I think, goes and checks that out so you know what the state of the art is with this type of stuff, right? So Suno is one, kind of the bigger one that's been around for a while. And Udio is the other. Now, the interesting thing I'll tag onto this is this isn't just music related. So because these companies, specifically Udio, have trained on just mass data sets of comedy specials, of podcasts, of historic speeches, you can generate anything. If you want to generate a conversation between Abraham Lincoln and Martin Luther King, you can do that. If you want to create a 2-hour-long podcast about any topic that you prompt it to create, it will do that. You can do a full comedy special with audience interaction. It's insane how detailed and how nuanced the outputs of these things are and how good they sound. Like that's what I have to keep coming back to. These sound, you would not know. The only reason you would know the difference for the most part between this and something maybe you or I would create is the audio fidelity is not there yet. So the audio fidelity probably has another 20% to go before it's really at the level of something I might record or you might record. Yeah. But I mean, again, we're still early days of that. I think that bridge will be crossed to a large degree, but those last few percentage points are always the most difficult, right? So we'll see how long it takes to actually really get it up to that level, but it almost doesn't matter because people are engaging with this at a high level because it's never been done before.
My gosh, that raises all kind of questions in my head right now. I mean, one is, I agree with you, the 80-20 rule, where 80% of the quality for the majority of the users is absolutely good enough.
Yes.
For, a speech at a conference, for presentation materials, things like that. You don't have to be perfect. We don't have to do a video conference and call in 4K. High resolution is good enough. But man, what about, licensing issues and data privacy? How is that going to be addressed?
Well, this is the crazy part of this. So we have to look at this in two ways. So there's there's the AI model, right? And then there's the data that the AI model is trained on. So the model you could think of like the engine, right?
Yes.
So all of these things can exist without training on copyrighted data, without licensing it, right? Mm-hmm. Like there's plenty of production music libraries as an example. There's plenty of karaoke companies as an example that have the ability to license in large repositories, of data to these, and by the way, to these companies to train on. Like Stability AI, for an example, licensed a massive data set from a company called AudioSparks. It's a production music library where AudioSparks owns all the IP they bought from creators that they are then licensing to third-party AI companies for training purposes, right? So it exists. But you don't get the quality of results if you can just go train on Taylor Swift's catalog. Obviously, the quality of that content is higher and more diverse the wider you spread that data set. And so you have some companies that are really focused on ethically, quote unquote, doing this. And that's even a nebulous term in this space about trying to properly license data. And then other ones are just treating it like the Wild West and doing whatever they want. And different areas of the world are taking more or less aggressive stances on trying to enforce data privacy issues. So in the United States, this is actively being worked on. Tennessee has passed a bill around this, around name, image, likeness stuff, around voice models and whatnot. But it's fascinating. To me, there's only three ways this ends. If you're a company that just said, we're going to train on everything we can get our hands on, we do not care, we're unscrupulous about this.
Yeah.
Either it's going to go to the Supreme Court, which I think it will, and this will be deemed fair use. So the idea that it's okay to train on all this stuff because you're not storing the data. We're really going to enforce copyright on the output. Did you make something that's so close to a Taylor Swift song that Taylor Swift can sue you? Basically that, right? Which Sure. I mean, that's kind of what humans do, right? We ingest all sorts of inputs from around us and we amalgamate those into what we hope is a novel idea, whether it's a book or a piece of music or a film or what have you. And if it's not, and it's too close to something else, we can be taken to court for that. It happens all the time. Sometimes those are, there's validity to those lawsuits. Sometimes they're very speculative, but this still happens. Think about the burden on the court system that would be. If AI was generating millions of songs, derivative works a day, all trained on copyrighted material, and every artist could sue, it becomes crazy to think about, right? And a lot of these companies, if you looked at the terms of service, have really tried to protect themselves against this. As far as damages and whatnot, that's not really going to be effective. So one option is it's deemed fair use. They can do this. We'll just check the output. The other of which is there's some type of compulsory license, blanket license that says if somebody agrees that you can, it's kind of like cover songs. If somebody agrees that you can cover their song, then once they do that, they open the floodgates for everyone to cover their song. They've given permission once, now permission has been given, and they get paid a statutory rate for that, right? And it's some level of standardization, so we don't have to negotiate these things on an artist by or song by song basis, which would be impossible. So it's possible that from the federal government is regulated. The other alternative is, and this is I know I'm being long-winded about this, but I think it's fascinating, is that, and this is what the race is. If these companies can amass massive user bases, right? If this can really catch on like wildfire, where people want to make music like this, and they establish this as the new norm, right? And let's say they're able to monetize it, which Suno is currently, you can pay to use Suno right now. Udio is still free. Then that gives them leverage to go then negotiate with major labels, with artists, with publishers, to share a piece of that pie that they maybe legally or illegally created, right? So that people kind of begrudgingly participate, because now fans have an expectation of this. They've created it while the legal stuff was getting kind of figured out. I mean, that's not dissimilar to what's happened with streaming. If you think back to the days of that, where everyone kind of came on board because everyone now, they created an expectation in the market, and you can't just then take that away and expect not to have, people be upset. So I think one of those three things, just in some form or fashion, is gonna happen.
Wow, fascinating. I have to say. Let's step back for a second. Let's look at your company, which is roughly 9 to 10 years old within the music industry, and maybe inspire a little bit other entrepreneurs who either are in the middle of starting a company, taking advantage of AI, or somebody like you, where you had an established business over the years. But I would assume, and I'd like to get a better understanding, how did you embrace, how did you explore the additional features that AI was bringing to your company's services and products that didn't exist before? And I would assume at one point you had to decide, if we don't do this, somebody else will, and we will be killed as a company. Walk us a little bit through that process and maybe give us some examples where you had a world before and now you have a world after AI.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start through the lens of LANDR, and then I'll kind of broaden it out just to my work as an audio engineer and as a business person in general. So LANDR's unique because I said earlier, they were kind of the first mover on all of this stuff. And for, if you talk to a lot of the AI companies in music that exist now, they all know LANDR, because LANDR was kind of the ground zero for a lot of this. And we took a lot of the initial flack from people in the music industry for even automating anything, right, related to music production. And I'll just tell one story about this, because I think it's somewhat indicative of maybe where we're heading. So LANDR, I mentioned this already, automated mastering. If you don't know what mastering is, it's the very last stage of the music production process before you release a song out to Spotify or iTunes or Apple Music or what have you, right? The analogy I will make is, if you've ever taken, I think everybody has, a picture on your phone and uploaded it to Instagram as an example. Mm-hmm. You may look at the picture you took and you may think that picture looks pretty good, but then you run it through a couple of filters, right? And it takes the red eye out and it cleans things up, and maybe it upscales it. And all of a sudden, wow, it's so much more professional, but you wouldn't have even known if you didn't have those two things side by side. Yeah. In music, that initial picture is the mix. It's the combination of all the things that you recorded and mixed together. And then a mastering engineer like myself, or an automated tool like LANDR, will take that mix and just correct it a bit, like fix things that are wrong, enhance things, remove things, make sure that it's it's going to be competitive with other professional music that's out there in the market. And then you release your music into the market.
Sorry to interrupt, but is it really targeting the tail end of the professional side, or also an individual like me who likes to play with a little bit of music?
It's a great question. I think now it kind of deals with both. But initially, I think LANDR maybe made a little bit of a misstep as a company where they went too broad with who they thought their demographic was, right? So professionals are going to be the most skeptical, right? We're going to be the most impacted potentially by this type of technology, and we're going to be the most critical, right? We have our ears are trained ears, right? We know what we're listening for. So if it's not perfect, that's a problem. Whereas it's the 80-20 thing, right? Whereas if you go after the wider market that is creating a lot of content, that doesn't have the money to hire engineers, but there's a number of reasons why that market is a much better fit for something like this. It works better. And eventually LANDR was like, okay, that's who we're going after, kind of beginners, aspiring creators, kind of intermediate level producers, musicians, artists, all of that stuff, not after audio engineers, right? So, and it worked. And I think, but there was a large outcry from the audio engineering community, which I'm a part of, that this was going to take their jobs, right? This was going to take either, it's interesting, because again, it's the same narrative you hear now. You heard one of two responses. Either it doesn't sound good. So in other words, the AI is not good and it will never be good, right? You always hear that from people. No, I'll never be good, right? That's when you know you're doing something right? When people can't see that far into the future. Or that it was going to take their job. So they're either very scared by it or dismissive of it, right? Any disruptive technology goes through the same cycle. So over the years, we've found, it's 10 years into LANDR's history almost now, right? As content, the amount of content being created has scaled, the need for tools like LANDR has scaled, right? Because the average person can't pay, even if I did mastering, my mastering rate, for everybody, just so you know, is somewhere between like $150 and $300 a song, okay? The average person didn't spend that much money on their microphone, much less one song, much less the mix they have to hire somebody to do for that. You know what I mean? Like, it's preposterous to think that we're taking work away from professional engineers when 95% of the content making world will never spend that amount of money on one stage of the production process. So we found that, yes, LANDR democratized access to that. And it didn't take jobs away from professional engineers for sure, right? We all have more work now than we've ever had. But what it did that I thought was interesting, and I think this is maybe an analog to what could happen with generative music, is that a percentage of the people who now feel like they can participate in music production and get something back that sounds better than what they put in, right? And that's how you can keep people coming back to anything. If you can surprise them with the quality of what they did, that's the secret to engagement, right? A percentage of them will continue to make music. A percentage of them will buy a nicer microphone, learn how to play guitar, learn how to DJ, right? They'll move up into the professional ranks of the, in this case, music, but it could be any field we're talking about. And I think that's fascinating. So when we think, oh, AI is going to kill off an industry, well, yes, it's widening the funnel for people that can participate, but a percentage of those people are going to move up and feed into the professional side of the industry, hire people like me, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Buy
audio interfaces, all that type of stuff. And that's what we've seen, I think, with LANDR, as the creator tools community has just scaled kind of in parallel. So it's interesting to see the effect AI actually has versus the effect that people kind of, stir up thinking that it's going to have. And we'll see how it plays out on the generative music side of things.
So how then have you implemented AI functionalities into your platform that is either increasing the efficiency on your end or increases the interaction and the ability to produce something, me as a user, that did not exist before?
Yeah. So I'll speak more generally about this, right? So this is just the music industry at large and the various types of AI tools that exist and how people are using them, all right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, the most obvious one is ChatGPT, right? So that's the one that I think is applicable, obviously, far outside of the music industry. All of my paperwork now is automated through ChatGPT, right? I used to spend an inordinate amount of time invoicing labels and putting together when you deliver a master to a label. And I've delivered tens of thousands of masters to major record labels. There's a lot of documentation that goes into that, just data entry, right? The fact that now that is, I mean, literally saves me 2 hours a day probably to have that completely automated by ChatGPT. And of course, there's a number of other use cases, but that is amazing, right? We talked a bit about the AI, generative music side of things. There's a lot of companies that do that, and there's a lot of use cases for that beyond just kind of what we chatted about. Obviously, people need music for their social media posts. People need music for film and TV, all sorts of things. But some of the other use cases I find that are interesting, composition assistance, right? So we think about, I want to separate what I just talked about, which is you type in what you want, you get an piece of audio back that is the thing. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of AI assistive tools for composition that just kind of help you along the process. It's more like a bidirectional discussion where you're getting, you may input a MIDI melody that you played on a MIDI keyboard as an example, and it will help you orchestrate that, or it will suggest things that could go with that, or it will, help build an arrangement beyond that. I mean, the number one thing people struggle with when it comes to music production is not coming up with an idea. I mean, I would imagine that most people watching this, if I said, give me in 5 minutes, I want you to be able to hum like a 5-note melody that you came up with. Most people could do that. You go da, 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 or whatever it is. It doesn't matter. But then if I said, I want you to build a vertical arrangement around that, meaning I want to know what the bass line, the drums, piano, the strings are doing, and then horizontally build that out so there's a verse, chorus, bridge, that's where people get stuck. That's why so much music is left uncompleted. We have nuggets of ideas that we can't ever, build into what we would consider to be a proper releasable piece of music. And even the definition of a releasable piece of music is changing these days. Yeah. But these tools help you do that. And I find that incredibly useful. And we typically don't look down on that type of technology. Samples and loops are very similar. If you come to LANDR or you go to Splice and you want to download a drum loop or a loop of a piano, we don't typically think of that as cheating anymore, right? It used to be, you would say, oh, that's lazy. You should learn how to play piano or hire a piano player. Those things are now widely accepted, and there's massive businesses around that. And a lot of the biggest artists in the world, if not almost all of them, make use of that tech. These AI tools are like intelligent extensions of something we've already been doing for years, right? And that's one thing you have to keep in mind when you think about all this stuff. It's not like it's just come out of nowhere that you can do this. It's been a progression of the democratization of access to tools and the assistive nature of tools and workflows. So that one thing, and I'll go through a few more, and there's some more boring applications of this. So one would be, and this is one that I would wish would be automated away tomorrow, which is restoration. So if you work in film or television production or gaming or music, you spend a lot of time removing pops and clicks and noise and air conditioners and, generator sounds. And there's a gardener outside. And for all the different things that can happen if you're recording sound on set, if you are, working on music for someone, if you're recording in your home, what have you. And those things have begun to be more automated over the years, where instead of I will literally, on one song, okay, like one 3-minute song, I could do hundreds of edits by hand, hundreds of edits, me going and pulling out little minute issues that the majority of the world may or may not hear, but are important to get things cleaned up and professional. Great. Automate that for me. I would be happy. And a lot of that exists. And it goes beyond just music. I mean, it's, when we're talking over Zoom, as an example, the ability to clean up dialogue in real time and enhance it so it sounds better. It sounds like I have a better microphone than I do. All that type of stuff, I think, is incredibly important for communication, not just, real time, but also in recorded media.
Wow.
Yeah. And the last one, I could go on for an eternity about all the different uses for this. I mean, the last two examples I'll give, when it comes to, and this is something I related earlier when I was talking about the idea of us using loops and samples, where you're basically taking Lego bricks of music and piecing them together, and that's okay to build an arrangement that way, and AI is just making that a more intelligent, dynamic process. When we make music, we open up, if you go out today and you bought a digital keyboard, right, that has sounds in it, you're not going into that keyboard and learning how to make a sound from scratch. You're going to go through presets and go to the piano sound and go to the synthesizer sound you want, right? And then maybe you'll tweak that if you learn how to do that sort of thing. But we're used to working from preset sounds, right? That goes for virtual instruments in a computer. Well, AI has taken that now to a whole other step where you can just type in, I want a Reese bass line, which is a type of bass line, or I want an upright acoustic bass sound, and it will generate that for you and then give you the option to tweak. Or you can drag and drop an audio file that has a sound that you like in it, and it will recreate that sound for you. So you can now provide examples from the real world of things that inspire you. And instead of taking literally years to learn how to customize and all the parameters of synthesis and sampling that I love as a professional, but is very difficult for people to learn and develop their ear for, you can now automate that process. So it's just another step in something that's already happened, but it's just more engaging and dynamic at this point. But I can
that's you know what, I have a Rowland high-end drum set, and you just gave me a few ideas. I didn't even think about it. I have to revisit my drum set and see how I can upload some AI features into my Rowland drum set. Maybe two more questions to squeeze in very quickly.
Yeah.
So if you look at the hype that we currently have, primarily generated through all the chat GPT, although it was a wonderful moment for the world to recognize what AI, is going to be and what it can do. But what are people actually want versus what actually is capturing in the headlines? Is there a disconnect, or is it all very much aligned? What's your expert opinion on that?
Yeah, so I think if we just kind of take a look at what the headlines are, right? A lot of, if you're look, we're focusing on music here. A lot of it is that if everyone can make music, right? If everyone can just type in what they want to exist and it exists, that's going to destroy the music industry. Like, no one's going to want to go listen to a Drake song on Spotify if I can type something in and get my own sort of version of a Drake song that didn't come from him directly, right? Didn't come from his mind, but is an amalgamation of maybe all of his songs that the AI was trained on, right? Intermixed with my own lyrics if I want to do that, right? That somehow that is what fandom is. And I don't agree with that. I think man, this is a whole rabbit hole in and of itself, but the idea, it's awesome to be able to personalize content, right? I think that, we talk about that as being like this big area of the film industry and the game industry. What happens if you watched a movie and it could subtly be different and targeted just for you, right? Or a song, it could be, it's not, maybe not the same version of the song that you listen to, but mine will have something based upon my streaming listening history that really makes it almost like an advertisement stickier to me. And it's an interesting idea, or that I want to go in and create music. Great, right? That's an amazing thing for fans to do. But I think one of the reasons we love art is the shared experience around art. And I think if you abstract that too much and make everything malleable and everything different, then you lose some of what actually makes people. I mean, look at the new Taylor Swift album, right? I mean, my God, the amount of my nieces are obsessed with it, and it's in a vacuum. I don't think they would be. It's that shared experience with all of their friends and making bracelets with the song names, and they know the instruments and they know the melodies. Do you know what I mean? Like, yeah. So I think when we talk about that, this is AI, generative AI music is going to have an impact on the music industry. But like most tech, it's not going to be as dramatic as what people fear it's going to be, right? And it's ultimately up to us on the legal side and the artistic side to figure out how we navigate that. How do there's so many amazing opportunities for artists to leverage this technology to do cool stuff and engage with their fan base at a scale and a level of personalization that would have been impossible previously. Or they can freak out and say that it's going to be the end of the world. And they can have careers either way. But I think as we see the music industry kind of split, where we have traditional streaming, which is a very transactional relationship. I'm the creator, you're the fan, here's my version of my song, it's here. Maybe a few people get to remix it, but that's what you're streaming. Yeah. Versus the more social media side of things, where I contribute music, and a lot of the tools for this generative AI stuff and the manipulation of music are going to live on these platforms. And the people that want that will go there, and there'll be some crossover between the two. So there's always going to be doom and gloom, specifically when it comes to an AI stuff. And some of that's warranted and some of it's not. You just have to kind of parse that out and think logically about where this could land based upon what's happened before.
If I look at human behaviors, including myself, I would agree that fundamentally people like to be sprinkled with, I want to listen to music. I want to enjoy it. I don't want to necessarily spend most of my time creating my own music. I'm still a potential customer that is not walking away anytime soon from listening Spotify.
Yes.
For example, right? If I look at video editing, it's the same thing, right? We could actually take all the vacation videos that we are doing in the billions and sit at home and actually fine tune, overlay with video, special effects, whatever you do. Nobody does that.
Nobody does that.
We just capture the whole thing, we throw it into social media, and then that's the end of it. And then there will be probably a little bit of an overlap, but it's not that much.
No, but there are people who are going to, and there already are. I mean, look at the user bases of Suno and Udio that love going in and messing with that stuff. Takes us back to what I talked about earlier. People who love music, but never are going to pick up a guitar, are never going to try to learn to DJ, or even they're too scared to sing, right? And there's other people, and there's a lot of anxiety and pressure around that. But now they feel like, I mean, you can go read their comments, look at the forums, look at how empowered people feel by this technology. As scared as the music industry is how empowered a whole new group of people feel about quote unquote music production or whatever they're doing to create these things. And that I think is interesting. And I think that's just a new way for people to engage in music. I don't think it's a replacement for anything. It's just a new path. So
looking at AI, looking at use cases, how do you envision the next 5 years as a closing question?
Well, yeah, that's the tough question, right? Because it's changing. I got the next 5 days. I don't know if I can answer the next 5 days, much less 5 weeks, much less 5 years. A lot of what you're going to see is, of course, a refinement of a lot of these tools. The fidelity is the big thing, right? Making them sound better, and also a degree of nuance. And what you're definitely going to see is these tools creep more and more and more up the ladder to professionals, right? There will be a time in the next 3 years where you can't not be using AI if you're making music. It will be, unless you just want to play guitar, right? But if you're using a piece of software, we're not even going to be calling this AI anymore. It's just going to be software that runs inside of other software, right? Like it's just going to be how things work. I mean, it's very easy if you're a little older to come at this from a perspective of the lineage of technology and how it's affected your life. And this is a change and this is bad. But young people, this is just going to be how things work, right? And that's how all change happens. And it's okay. I mean, so I see it happening week by week now as more partnerships are signed and more licensing deals are done where companies are incorporating this technology, understanding that there's going to be a level of expectation and they need to serve as wide of a user base as possible. So I think the thing I'm the most excited about is how this continues to infiltrate is the wrong word, but to come into the professional world and really aid creators to do really more interesting music. And I think the last thing I'll say is, I think that's going to be the most fascinating artistic outcome of this. I personally love AI generated music and I love AI generated video because when it breaks, when it doesn't just make me a Taylor Swift song, when it hallucinates with a stochastic parroting, all of this stuff, it does weird things. It's things I've never heard before. I've never even seen before. And I find that fascinating because that then inspires me to take that and make something else out of it and move in a direction I would have never moved. And I think you're seeing a lot of people use it for that. So it's not all just, I want to recreate this that already exists in the world. It's like all technology. How can we break it? How can we move beyond it? And how can we incorporate it into our creative process?
That is an interesting comment that you are actually seeing the positive and the creativity out of the hallucination. That's an interesting comment. I like it.
Yeah, and I'm very lucky to have been raised and mentored by artists who are legends for doing that, right? It doesn't matter what the piece of technology is. Like Adrian Belew, I worked with him for years from King Crimson and Talking Heads and Frank Zappa. Trent Reznor, who I got to work with through Adrian, are the kings of they want to create sounds you've never heard before. And to do that, they oftentimes misuse technology. So at an early age, I was exposed to, I should be trying to use this for something it's not used for. And this circles back in closing to the thing we started with, which is the companies making this AI tech. The thing that's been the most interesting for them when I asked them that, they're in their short journeys, how it's been, is what their users use it for that they would have never dreamt. And that's the beauty for anybody building any technology is you put it in the hands of users and they take it in a direction far beyond your vision for it. And you pivot and adjust to that. And it opens up new markets and new products. And it's great.
Awesome. That is a very good closing statement. Daniel, thank you very, very much for sharing these insightful, visionary opinions based on somebody who really has been there for quite a while. Thank you very much. And I hope in the next few months I can invite you back and you give us an update what's being progressed over the next few months. So thank you very much and good luck to you and LANDR.
Awesome. Thank you for having me, Thomas.
Thank you.